Hey everyone, welcome back to Bible Tea Lovers. And today I'm going to be doing an overview of First Chronicles chapters 1 through chapter 15. So we didn't finish reading the Bible in 90 days, but I am still going to continue to read the entire Bible and see how long it takes. And still do videos with the things that pop out the most to me from each chapter. I'm still going to do that. I gotta say that trying to read the Bible in 90 days is hard. It's a lot of commitment and it's a lot to read each day. But what stopped me the most was the fact that I stopped and took a lot of notes from like each chapter. And one of the things with doing the 90-day challenge is that you can't take notes because it slows the process down by a lot, and you're just kind of supposed to read through and just read without taking notes and without highlighting, because it does take longer like that. And I did that at the beginning and it was really good, but then the more I read is the more I wanted to highlight and the more I wanted to take notes. So I stopped and did that, and it took like 3 hours each day to finish the reading for each day. So it did take a lot of time. And then we decided to do this challenge the last 3 months of the year, which during those 3 months we had a lot of church events and a lot of stuff we had to do for church. So that also took a lot of time out of being able to read. But I did make it all the way to I made it all the way to Nehemiah, and I gotta say I did learn a lot from all this time I read, and it allowed me to stay consistent. It allowed me to stay consistent in my reading, and I gotta say I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to continue to do this. So yeah, but today I'm going to do an overview over First of Chronicles chapters 1 through chapter 15, and in a separate video I'll be doing the other half of First Chronicles. So for First Chronicles, like the first 3 chapters, it talked a lot about the descendants of people and the sons of like Adam to Noah's sons, the descendants of Shem, descendants of Abraham. So I won't get really into that because it's just kind of naming the people and the sons of all these people from back then. The first thing that popped out to me was in chapter 4 verse 9. It says, "There was a man named Jabez who was more honorable than any of his brothers. His mother named him Jabez because his birth had been so painful. He was the one who prayed to God of Israel, 'Oh, that you would bless me and expand my territory. Please be with me in all that I do, and keep me from all trouble and pain.' And God granted him this request." So we see that Jabez asked the Lord to be with him at all times and to bless him in everything that he did and to keep him away from troubles and pain. And it says that the Lord granted him this request, and I think this is a good prayer for us to make, to ask the Lord to be with us in everything that we do and for him to bless everything that we do, because it's the Lord who will help us achieve all our goals in life. And mainly it's the beginning of the new year, and I think this is a good prayer to make to the Lord, for him to be with us in everything that we do throughout this entire year, and for him to keep us away from troubles and pains. Another thing that popped out to me was in chapter 5 verse 20. It says, "They cried out to God during the battle, and he answered their prayer because they trusted in him. So the Hagrites and all their allies were defeated." And then verse 22 says, "Many of the Hagrites were killed in the battle because God was fighting against them." So we see here that the people cried out to the Lord when they needed him, and we see that the Lord answered their prayer because they trusted. they prayed and they trusted that the Lord was going to answer that prayer. And I think that is very important, because when we pray, we also have to trust that the Lord is going to answer that prayer, whether it is how we want him to answer, or if it's not what we want him to say. But we know that God knows best, and we have to trust in the Lord in all times. And when we pray, we have to trust that he's going to answer our prayer, and that he's going to answer according to what he knows is best for us. And then verse 22, it says, many of the Hagrites were killed in the battle because God was fighting against them. So we see here that being against God can lead you to death. We see that the Lord was fighting against the Hagrites, and many of them were killed because it wasn't human fighting against them, it was the Lord. And being against the Lord is very dangerous and something that we don't want for ourselves. We know that the Lord is always going to be there, willing to help his people. All we have to do is cry out to him, pray, and trust that he'll do it. So the next thing was in chapter 11. The end of verse 3 says, and they anointed him king of Israel, just as the Lord had promised through Samuel. So here it's talking about David when he was anointed king. And it says, just as the Lord had promised through Samuel. So we know that back in 1 Samuel, pretty sure it was 1 Samuel, the Lord promised Samuel that David would be anointed king of Israel. And here we see that the Lord keeps his promise to the people and to Samuel, which is the person who the Lord told that David was going to be king. Then verse 9 of chapter 11 says, and David became more and more powerful because the Lord of heaven's armies was with him. So we see that David became powerful because he was always obedient to the Lord, and David always trusted the Lord, and David always asked the Lord for help and for guidance. So we see that in order for us to be successful, we have to obey the Lord's word. We have to obey his word and everything he asks from us and demands from us, which is love him with all our heart, which is to not serve other gods or statues or images, to love our neighbor. All these things that he told the Israelites back then is still the same for us. So we have to be obedient to the Lord in order to be successful here on earth. But most importantly, we have to obey him, so we know that we will have eternal salvation. Because we know that if we're obedient to the Lord and follow everything that he asks from us, we will have eternal salvation, which is the most important thing, is to know that when the Lord comes back, we'll go with him. And that's the biggest goal we could ever have, is to make sure we live a pure life for us to have that eternal salvation. Chapter 12 verse 22 says, day after day, more men joined David until he had a great army, like the army of God. These are the numbers of armed warriors who joined David at Hebron. They were all eager to see David become king instead of Saul, just as the Lord had promised. So here we see that the Lord blessed David and provided him with a great army. But we know that David was always obedient to the Lord. So again, here we see that the Lord blesses and the Lord helps those who are obedient to him and follow everything that he asked from us. The next thing that really popped out to me was in chapter 13, verse 14, when it says, the ark of God remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he owned. So here we see that when the Lord's presence is in a place, everything is blessed. There is nothing better than having the Lord's presence in a place, because when the Lord is in a place, you feel peace, you feel calm, and you just feel good. And we see that the Lord blesses everything when he's in a place. Yeah. Chapter 14 verse 10 says, "So David asked God, 'Should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?' The Lord replied, 'Yes, go ahead. I will hand them over to you.'" Then again in verse 14 of chapter 14 it says, "And once again David asked God what to do. 'Do not attack them straight on,' God replied." So we see that David was always asking the Lord for help and for guidance, and he was always asking the Lord what he should do and what he shouldn't do, and we see that the Lord always gave him an answer. I think this is also very important for us to do as Christians, is to always ask the Lord for guidance and for help, mainly when we don't know what direction to take in a situation. I think it's very important to ask the Lord what to do, and the Lord will answer that prayer just how he answered to David back then. We know that David was successful in everything he did because he always asked the Lord for guidance. He didn't just make decisions on his own. He always asked the Lord for help in everything that he did. And that's also a really good prayer for us to do, mainly at the beginning of the year. Ask the Lord this year to help us with the decisions we take. Verse 14 of chapter 15 says, "So the priests and the Levites purified themselves in order to bring the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to Jerusalem." And we see that the priests and Levites purified themselves in order to carry the ark of the Lord. So I think to all those who serve from the altar, it's important to live a pure life, to always make sure that you're doing the right thing. So that's it for First Chronicles chapters 1 to chapter 15, and then I'll be making another video for First Chronicles chapter 16 through chapter 25. God bless.